Yeah.
And everyone can see an airplane wing.
Yep, you're up.
Mm-hmm.
All right, great. Hopefully I found a couple videos that are pretty awesome, so I hope they work too. So I'm going to try to keep my screens a little more tight, and then I took the video off. But to start off, this is not a military wing, by the way. It's commercial. I took this photo. It is a commercial jet somewhere over the Caribbean at sunset. But anyway, Jim asked me to put together a little presentation about my dad's military career and a little bit about my life in Okinawa, and specifically as this came up approximately 2 weeks ago when we talked about or described where we were in 1987, and that was the summer that my family and I returned to the States from being stationed in Okinawa. My dad was stationed there at Kadena, and so I'm going to start from the beginning with my dad. So this is a photo of him circa 67, 68. And so when he got his draft card in 1967, he made the decision that he was not going to let the government decide where he was going to go. He was going to enlist, and he was going to choose the military branch. And this is during Vietnam War, of course. And so he did choose the military branch that probably had the least involvement in the Vietnam War. And so that's what he did as soon as he graduated from high school. And he went to the Navy. And this photo is after basic training. Tried to look for some information back home to find anything about his basic training. All we could find actually was like this yearbook, and it was the Naval Base Training 1967, and it was just full of photos. And we tried to look through and find my dad, and there's just like thousands of young guys that they all look the same, so we couldn't find any picture of them. This one, however, is when he is in naval training in Iceland. He was training for air traffic controller, and the back of the photo says that it looks like it's his handwriting, and we think he sent this to his mom. They took this photo of me inside the barracks on the floor behind my bunk, writing a letter to my family. Yeah, and it just says it was last Sunday afternoon in Iceland. So from there, it looks like he did go to he was stationed on a aircraft carrier. I don't have the name of it, but we do recall him talking about that. And that's what he did during the Vietnam War, was he was an air traffic controller. During his time doing that, he wanted to fly planes. And in order to fly planes in the military, you have to have a college degree. So he did his tour in the Navy, got out, went to college at the University of Jacksonville, and he did a 4-year and 3 years, and then re-enlisted in the Air Force. And so to fly planes, and also to fly a plane, you have to be an officer. To be an officer, you have to have a college degree. This is the plane that he flew. It is a KC-135. It's a stratotanker. It is what's referred to as a gas station in the sky. This plane fuels just about every plane you can imagine in midair. And I found a really awesome video that I hope shows what this looks like, because it is pretty awesome. This plane is quite large. The wingspan is 130 feet. The length of the plane is about 140 feet. There is obviously fuel storage capacity, but also it's a cargo plane, and it, it will haul vehicles, supplies, and there's room for people as well. The KC-135 has a crew of 4, used to be 4. There's been some technology changes, but when my dad flew, there's a pilot, co-pilot, a navigator, and the boom operator. And I'll show you what the boom operator does, because that's a pretty interesting job as well.
What did your dad do? Did he fly it, or was he a boom?
He was
operator?
actually the boom operator is an enlisted position.
Okay.
And so my dad was a navigator. Back, this is, height of the Cold War, 70s and 80s, and they didn't have the technology and GPS systems that we have today. So there's actually a navigator that uses the stars maps so that they know where they're going, where they need to be, what altitude they need to fly at, and different things like that. So my dad was the navigator.
Do you get the term lower the boom from
Yeah.
Wow.
the boom operator?
Probably, because that makes a lot of sense.
It does.
You're gonna lower the boom.
Yeah,
That's pretty good, Phil.
it is. Yeah, the boom operator
Okay.
sits at the back of the plane, and there's like a little hatch that opens up, and he steers this fuel boom into the tanks of all kinds of planes. I mean, I'm talking about fighter jets, the F-15s, Air Force, F-16s of the Navy, B-52s, which is this next photo. This is actually a photo, the first plane with the little tail that you can see, that's the fuel boom. So
I
if
see
you,
it.
Yep. So if you're ever near a military base and you look up, the tanker is very distinguished from any other plane because it has that little tail.
That's how we're filling up down here in Florida.
It's flying by.
Yeah, and then so this is an exercise. We think this photo was probably 1980, 1981, so it's not in the best quality. But so my dad is actually in the tanker, and the plane that is coming up below, the large black one, is actually a B-52 bomber. And
those were they dropped the big ones, right?
Yes. Yes. And so this picture is at K.I. Sawyer, which is no longer an Air Force base. Once upon a time, K.I. Sawyer was, the sole purpose of it was for alert readiness during the Cold War. And it's, and the reason it ever existed, it's in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, is because it is the closest we could get to Russia. And you kind of think about it, how is that even possible? But if you think about it, if you go straight north over to Canada and over the Arctic Circle, there's Russia, and there is the strategic points of Russia right over the right over the North Pole. And that was, yeah, and that was K.I. Sawyer's purpose, was to be nuclear ready. And yes, there were nuclear warheads at K.I. Sawyer, and there were, long range missiles. It was a B-52 and tanker Air Force Base installation. And so well, growing
was that
up,
Michigan or Canada?
It's in Michigan. It's in the Upper Peninsula. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And that base closed in 1997. Didn't make it through that round of cuts. In today's environment, probably shouldn't have been closed, but it is what it is. But yeah, so it closed, but at the height, in the 70s and 80s, it was Cold War ready. And so when I was a kid, my dad would be gone for weeks at a time, called TDY. I don't know what that stands for, but
we have it all state. TDY, it's temporary duty.
Yeah. So they would do these war exercises to be on alert. And that's what TDY was. And they would do them constantly for weeks at a time or a month at a time. They, the men and women that were in the military would be sequestered on base. And so we would see him periodically during that time, but quite a bit when we were, during the 70s and 80s, that was quite a bit of what he did. And
he couldn't tell you what he was doing, right?
No. There wasn't any talk, there wasn't, but they did constant exercises, for whenever there was that, if Russia ever decided to attack, if there was any kind of, nuclear attack, that is what they prepared for constantly during the 70s and 80s.
Wow.
And so the next one, I'm going to try and see if I can share a video that I found that is pretty awesome.
Cool. Is it on a YouTube or is it on a?
The first video that I found is actually an Air Force video.
Okay.
I can't find, I'm trying to get my screen to cooperate here.
Is it on the PowerPoint or?
Nope, I didn't embed it in the PowerPoint because it didn't quite, I didn't know if it was going to
I see
work.
something up. Okay. Well, no, that's my recording. Can you minimize your screen? Yeah, and then pull it up.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right. So this one kind of gives me goosebumps a little bit.
All right.
All right. So this is a tanker. And it looks like it's taking off in Minot, North Dakota, which is a large B-52 tanker Air Force base, but I have no idea where this is taken from. But in my dad's career, he was, well, we as a family were stationed at a couple places twice. Offutt Air Force Base, which is just outside of Omaha, Nebraska, is a very large Air Force base, very large tanker, bomber, Air Force installation. We then lived in Mildenhall, England, and then came back to the States, and we were at Offutt again. And then we were stationed at K.I. Sawyer, and then from K.I. Sawyer, we went to Okinawa, Japan, which is Kadena Air Force Base. And then from there, we came back to K.I. Sawyer. And that is where my dad ultimately retired. But as this video illustrates, it's the plane, you know, it is quite large, very distinguished. You can easily tell, you know, what kind of that it, well, to me, you can tell that it's a tanker.
Definitely tell now.
Yes, definitely. And with this, I mean, the amazing thing to me is that, you know, they're refueling other jets. Some, you know, some are fighter jets, some are, you know, the bombers, but it's in midair. And, you know, as you can see, it's over any kind of terrain. And it's just a crew of 4 people. To me, that's, you know, it's quite amazing with that.
Yeah, especially those fighter jets are a lot faster than this plane.
Correct. Yep. And it's not just Air Force jets that they refuel. They'll do Navy as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And
Kelly, do you know how long the fueling process would take?
I think
Go
it depends. Yeah, I think it depends on, you know, the airplane that they're refueling. It seems to be a fairly quick process, from what I can tell. You know, again, and there's an even better video that shows an actual several different flights in progress in which, you know, they are refueling planes. It looks quick, but I don't know if there's some splicing on the video so that it's just showing, you know, the different types of planes that they can do in midair. But yeah,
I'm sure like Air Force One, you know, gets refueled in the middle of the air, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's Air Force One. There is another tanker, KC-130, and that's more of a Marine and Navy plane, but that tanker has a capability of refueling helicopters. This does not.
Wow.
So the KC-135s do not have the ability to refuel helicopters. But in today's technology, these tankers also can refuel drones. We kind of forget.
Really?
Yeah, you kind of forget like how that, you know, much more of a drone warfare nowadays. But yeah, they refuel drones as well. And
Unmanned.
unmanned, yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Unmanned drones, yeah, it's pretty, you know, and again, that fuel boom is manually operated. I think the boom operator's job is way more,
Yeah.
yeah, important, then, you know, I mean, obviously you need to know where to go, but to get that, you know, lined up correctly,
Right.
and yeah, it is pretty amazing.
That's cool. That's very cool.
I'm stopping each one and then sharing.
Sorry.
All right. So here is an actual photo of a refueling in progress. I cannot tell what the plane is below. It looks rather large, so I'm guessing it was probably a bomber, but I don't know. The hard part of putting this together is that my dad, you know, did not talk very much about his military experience or his careers or his career or his accomplishments. We didn't know really a whole lot until he was in hospice, and that was my dad passed away in August of 2012, complications of stage 4 lung cancer. But during that time when he was in hospice, the Department of Defense sent his military record, and that was how we were able to find out a lot of information about his career, because again, he didn't talk about it.
You didn't
And
talk about it, yeah.
right. So one of the interesting pieces when I was at home and was going through, you know, what the file was, and some of it was kind of, I don't know, I kind of thought it was funny, not humorous, but just in a way to where some of the awards that he was given was marksmanship and attendance and things like that, to where it just seemed, you know, odd to me that the military would recognize, and you know, people got awards or recognition for that. But in the file that I had found, and was a write-up in circa 1974-75, and he was on the flight crew of the last reconnaissance flight in Vietnam.
Wow.
And of that, there was a list of, you know, there's some generals, admirals, but there was also senators and congressmen. And I was always going to look the senators and congressmen up because I didn't recognize any of the names, but my political knowledge of the early 70s is not very good, but I was always going to look up that information. But when I was looking through it, I had asked my dad, I said, oh my God, you know, and I read it to him. And I said, this is pretty fascinating. You never talked about it. And he's like, yeah, it was just part of the job.
All right.
Yeah. It's just like,
So humble, yeah.
yeah. I was like, are you serious? This is, you know, kind of, this is noteworthy. The last recon flight in Vietnam.
It is. I mean,
Yeah.
is that after like the embassy, like Saigon, they, you know, got overtaken?
I
Or
don't,
was it before that?
I think it was right around that
Had to
time.
be. Had
Yeah.
to be.
Yeah. I don't remember the specific date. And when I was home, not last weekend, wait, was I home last weekend? Weekend before.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was kind of good. It was perfect timing when he asked me about this, because I was able to go home and look through some stuff, and we could not find that file. I do have some information from his career file that I'll share, but could not find that file with all of the other kind of, you know, like I said, marksmanship, attendance, and just other accommodations that, you know, it was in his career. But so I don't know the specific date, but I just remember, you know, reading that and then asking him about it, and it was no big deal.
So on his plane, they had the actual cameras or whatever. They were taking pictures, the reconnaissance.
Right. Yeah. And there's actually some snippets of his career record that I'm going to share, because he did a lot of that. He did a lot of reconnaissance flights. And there's, you know, there's actually some mention of the fact that he liked to do those types of flights.
Wow.
Yeah. So when, and that falls into when he was gone, you know, for weeks at a time. There's, 70, 90 days sometimes. He was gone. And so that was the kind of, work that, he was doing. So, so it is true, when they say about military families and military wives, they really are very self-sufficient and independent because, whoever they're married to, that's in the military, chances are that person is gone quite a bit early in their career. And later in my dad's career, he wasn't doing TDY anymore.
Right.
So the next video I'm going to show is one I think that is pretty good. Let me find it here.
Do you remember what cities in Vietnam he was doing reconnaissance over?
Yeah, I don't. Let's see, where did it go? Okay, so this is from YouTube. Okay. And this is actual flight, and it actually shows the refueling in progress to several different planes. A lot of them are fighter jets. It's kind of loud, so I'm going to put it on mute. Because
I don't mind.
Okay.
So it's the gas station in the air.
Yes.
I kind of want to hear it.
Yeah. Can you? Is there any way? Oh, you know what you need to do? You have to, if you're hearing it, we're not, you got to go down to the share thing and make sure that thing's clicked. Like the audio part. Go to share screen down the bottom and see that arrow. After you click share screen, stop sharing for a second, or stop the video. Okay, now go to share screen.
Yeah.
And
share sound.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. It's loud.
It's all right. That's not loud. Do you have any idea where that's at?
None.
Here he comes. Oh, they already docked.
Yeah, there's a few of them there. Go pretty quick.
How come he didn't pay? So is there a chance of messing up and like missing the dock?
Looks like it would be.
Yeah, like you could do some major damage. So they're docked right now?
Yep.
So that was about, what, 20 seconds, Jim? I don't know. Wonder how much gas do they carry? A lot, probably, right?
It looks like there's always some extra that gets spilled out.
Where do they store it all? Is there a big tank?
Yep. There's a fuel storage tank
Okay.
in the tanker, and then right above that is a cargo area where they can haul other stuff.
Have you ever been in one of those, Kelly?
Yes,
Have you?
yeah. When they used to do air shows, some of the families would get
Yep.
a chance to, you know, fly in it.
Really?
Yep. I'm gonna speed this up to.
Did they carry any arms or anything like that?
No.
Or not? No.
Well, I mean, maybe as part of supplies, but the tankers didn't haul bombs or anything
Right.
like that. Yeah.
That'd be kind of a bad mix.
Yeah.
Gas and bombs. That's so cool.
So, wanted to get to the larger planes because
Yeah.
this looks like it's a KC-130.
Okay. And what's a KC-130 again?
They're another tanker.
Okay. I wonder if nowadays it's more automated, like instead of manual booms.
No,
No?
it is still a boom operator. The only thing that's
Really?
been that the nowadays not every tanker has a navigator because of the different
Right.
changes in technology and GPS.
GPS.
However, yeah, navigators are still on tankers when they are involved in more of your special operations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So some of them are retrofitted and some of them are not.
Got it.
All right.
Do you remember who the senator was on that last reconnaissance flight?
I just knew they were nobody that you would
Recognize?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I was always going to you know, look them up. But that folder, yeah, my mom, you know, we
Can't
looked
find it,
for
huh?
it. Yeah, we looked for it, but we were able to find, you know, some of his records. And like this one, it just kind of, I don't know, I thought it was interesting. I pulled out a couple of it, just that in the fact that, you know, again, he's, as I talked about him being TDY, this, you know, this talks about for nearly 70 days, flying 17 operational reconnaissance, you know, on a worldwide scale. You know, so the military, you know, I found his a bunch of yearly performance reviews. And so that's what this record is from. And it just talks about that, you know.
I'm sure he was exceeds.
Yeah, it looked like it. I didn't see any X's, you know, they were all on the far right.
How was his QAs? Pretty good?
Yeah, they were. My dad was pretty serious about, you know, flying and, you know, his work. It was, yeah, it was, here's a, you know, another record that talked about, you know, just, you know, I just find it kind of interesting, you know, in the military that they do the same kind of, you know, employee performance reviews and,
yeah,
you know,
right.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, and then, you know, early 1978, and it talks about, you know, he should be promoted to captain already at that time. Yeah. So
did he get promoted?
Yes.
Yeah.
He definitely did. I know that he was captain when we were stationed at K.R. Sawyer the first time, and that was in the early 80s. There's other record in here too I'll bring up that talks about his promotions.
Given a tough mission, I want Lieutenant Basor on my crew. That's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, and then it talks about too that, you know, be awarded the first oak leaf cluster to the air first oak leaf cluster to the air medal. And yeah, I don't know what that is. I just know when he wore his blues, there was, yeah, a big chunk of, I don't know, colors of metals and different things like
Yeah.
that. Couldn't tell you what they were, but that's the file that's missing, is the
Okay.
one that talks about all of what the awards were when he would wear his blues. I
It's
added,
around there somewhere. You'll find it.
yeah. I added some pictures of the life on a military base. So this is my house in Okinawa.
Cool house. Cool
Yeah,
house.
they're all cement. This is Okinawa, is an island of 60 miles at most in width and 90 miles long. It's in the Pacific. And these homes kind of look like they do in Florida in my mind, because and of course that makes sense because in the Pacific they call hurricanes typhoons.
Mhm.
And so yeah, all these homes would be hit constantly with typhoons. My dad talked about having to evacuate Kadena of, you know, not only the tankers, but it was a fighter squadron, a large fighter squadron of F-15s as well. So whenever the typhoons came, we didn't really see my dad because he was out, you know, on base as they were evacuating all of the airplanes and whatnot. It's my sister in the photo, but yeah, that was our house. My dad was stationed at Kadena Air Force Base, but we actually lived in a separate military base housing called Kashaba housing, and it was a mixture of military branches. So most of my neighbors were Marines. There was a few from the Department of Defense, but for the most part, it was Marines.
How were the Okinawans? Were they nice or
They were. I mean,
were they?
which I kind of found fascinating because it was just 40 years
Yeah.
later from World War II. So obviously a lot of the older Okinawans would have been on the island at the time of, you know, the Japanese occupation, and
Right.
with, you know, the US fighting for that island. The next one, this is a park that we were at routinely because there's soccer fields off to the right. Down in the bottom, you can see there's tires that are kind of half sticking up. We used to run on those, and I broke my leg on one of them falling.
Kelly.
We would put sand on top of them to make it really slippery. And anyway, but the big part about that is, you know, the naval ships that would dock in, and they would
Wow.
routinely, you know, come in there, and once in a while my dad, you know, would bring us to the park, but I think more so that he could see the ships coming in and out.
Massive.
Yes. And that's not an aircraft carrier, as you can see. I think that's just, I don't know, some kind of battleship. I have no idea. This is Naha, Okinawa, which is the largest city. As you can see, a lot of concrete buildings, but it's not primitive. And then this is the countryside in
Oh,
Okinawa,
wow.
which does look kind of primitive, but you can still see there's a modern house. And
Yeah.
again, you know, this is in the 80s. You know, some more cement, the thatch housing.
That wasn't part of the base, right?
No,
That was
this is off base.
okay.
Yep. So the housing that I was lived in, you know, to get on and off base, you have to go through security. So once in a while, there would be security breaches. And then we'd have like almost basically lockdown in the neighborhood.
Mm.
But otherwise, it's pretty safe. I mean,
Yeah. So like, you know, the Okinawans, were they a little bit ticked at the US for like establishing a base there? That
they are more so today.
are they?
Because there's a lot more interaction between the Okinawan younger women and the airmen, because you got to
Mhm.
think about and those in the Marines, you got to think about a lot of those guys are 18, 19 years old,
Mhm.
and they're on an island in the
Yeah.
Pacific, not a whole lot to do. When we
Right.
lived there was one TV station, and it was the same TV station for the bases in Korea, mainland Japan, the Philippines, and where we were. At one station, we got the soaps were 3 months behind. The Super Bowl, we would get the following day, and the story behind it is that they would tape it, and then an F-15 would fly that tape to whatever, I don't even I know the station wasn't on Okinawa, so I'm assuming it was on maybe mainland Japan or in Korea, but they
Mhm.
would fly that VHS tape is what I always imagined
Really?
it. Yep, so that we could see, so that all of the military personnel and their families in the Pacific could see the Super Bowl, but it was 24 hours later.
That's great.
Yeah. So a little bit you had talked about, you know, you and I talked about World War II and different remnants on the island.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about the Japanese, they did a lot of tunnels.
Hmm.
And so this is one of those tunnels. The interesting part is, you know, they've kind of preserved a lot of this. And so it was almost like a tourist attraction on Okinawa. But yeah, so this is what one of them looks like. This is another.
Was that on that mountain, the famous mountain in Okinawa that
I'll
we?
get to that, but I don't think
Okay.
this is where these were.
Okay.
Yeah. And here's another one. The next
Did
one
you
here,
ever go in those tunnels? Were they kind of claustrophobic or?
I don't remember having any problems being in the tunnels or anything like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is that mountain, that hill. And it's a little bit okay. So the kid in there is my brother, and he's pouting, which is not unusual. But this is Suicide Cliffs. And if anyone knows anything about the history of Okinawa during World War II, when the Japanese were, you know, defeat was imminent, many of the Japanese soldiers committed suicide either by sword or they threw themselves off the cliffs. And that's what
Really?
this is. And it's kind of a little bit macabre because, you know, they've turned it into a shrine. I can't quite call it a tourist attraction. It's more of a shrine and a memorial. But not only did the soldiers, you know, throw themselves off the cliffs, but family members did as well.
Really?
And that's what this is. There's a huge set of stairs that goes up to this area, and it's enclosed, you know, or the shrine. The next photo, you know, it is part of this, and it is pretty dark, so fair warning. But this is at that same shrine.
Wow.
And it's just there to see, which is, you know, like I said, it's pretty macabre, but that's Suicide Cliffs, and it is a large memorial there. So yep, moving on. This is my dad. Probably circa mid.
You can tell you're in the military. You got the military circa, you know.
Yeah.
Curious.
Yeah, he's in his flight uniform, and the other two guys over here in his blue or in their blues. I don't know the, you know, the difference, but yeah, you can see that these guys are probably, you know, more of flight crews versus, you know, these two over here, you do something else.
Was your dad an officer?
Yes. So my
Was he?
dad, yeah. So my dad retired as a major. So yeah, he was an officer. And so the house that I showed you was officer housing. I don't know if anyone knows about military housing, but it is separated by, you know, officer housing, and then there's enlisted housing. But my dad was, I never really knew what his rank was. He was very particular about me and my siblings not being concerned about his rank, him being an officer. Because it didn't pertain to us. And we would, yeah, he was very particular about that. The same as being very particular about there's no bragging in our house.
Really?
He's
Good
always, yes, he always felt that accomplishments speak for themselves. And yeah, so there was time I even got in trouble once. I think I was 5th or 6th grade for bragging about swimming. Yeah, I got grounded. Yeah, I got grounded for bragging about it.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
I couldn't go to swim practice for a week.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was very, very much so, which kind of explains why we really didn't even know much about his career, because it he just kind of felt like it wasn't for us to really know about.
Yeah.
There's next another piece from his performance, and I think this one was about the fact that I pulled it out because they used to do, if you look here, they would do, kind of exercises. And this one had to do with recognizing a bomb that was brought onto base. And it talks about that he intercepted this individual who came with a bomb, and then the package was analyzed and found to be a bomb simulator. It's just kind of interesting that the
Wow.
military would do all kinds of exercises and awareness, and somebody delivering a bomb to
Yeah.
a military installation. I just thought it was kind of interesting, so I
That
pulled that
is
out.
interesting.
Yeah.
Did he ever have that happen for real?
Well, there used to be lots of protests at the air base
Really?
in K.I. Sawyer because it had nuclear weapons, and there would be there was always protests from the kids that went to the local college.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they'd be
And where was that at? What?
K.I. Sawyer was in the Upper Peninsula.
Up
It's
UP. Okay.
yeah, in the UP. Yeah. And so this one talks about too that he should be placed, as far as Air Force officers destined for command position. So it was a nice, and this was at the time he was a captain. And so you can see the date in 85.
Yeah.
So we would have been on Okinawa in 85.
Did
The
you go to
next,
school there? Like
yeah.
an American school or?
Yeah, so on military bases, the school overseas, the schools are run by the Department of Defense. And we had, we went to school with other military kids. We didn't
Okay.
mix with, non-US.
Okay.
And our teachers were employees of the Department of Defense.
Did you have friends that were Okinawans?
No,
No.
nope. Yeah, we didn't really socialize, with Okinawans. There wasn't really any interaction, although there was the swim meet. I remember that we would we have like an invitational, and there were swim teams from the island that we would compete against, but
Okay.
yeah, nothing, but no other real interaction with them.
Okay.
So this one, I was trying to think why I pulled this one out. It's just, talks about 87 as a wing navigator, spearheaded, take your crew preparations. Just this one, he's a major. So this is it looks like 1988. So he had been promoted at that time.
He wouldn't be happy that you're talking about all those promotions.
Probably not.
He would not be happy.
Probably not. But towards the later part
but you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to do that.
Yeah,
You are.
Yeah. Towards the later part of his career, he was more he was a trainer. So he would train a group of navigators. They would, go to school with him. And so he was responsible for that. This one, it's just, another one where, it talks about, my most capable major, the 4010th or 410th. It just kind of talks about, who he was, what he did. And he's a major.
He's ready for more responsibility.
Yep. Yeah. And I pulled this out too, because the very bottom of it says promote to lieutenant colonel. And this was, in 88. Yeah. The unfortunate thing is that at that time he was already preparing for retirement. So, so he wasn't interested in furthering his career. He was going to do his 20 in the Air Force, and which he did. And then he retired.
And how many did he do in the Navy?
Just 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many people serve in both arms of the military? Not many, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, there was some newscast years ago to where somebody was talking about that he had served in 2 different branches of the military in the Vietnam War, and so did my dad. I don't think there's many of them out there that can say that. He was also in the first Gulf War. Didn't fly, but he was responsible for scheduling and he was in charge of the mobility squadron at that time. So that was, getting crews and the taker squadron, all together, and, making sure people are where they need to be. And that's what he did. That was what his role was in the Gulf War.
Was that Desert Storm or the
Yeah, the
Gulf?
Desert Storm. Yeah.
Yeah.
The first
Wow.
one in the the 90-day war.
Yep. The
And
quick
so,
one.
yep. Yeah. The last photo that we have, this isn't his retirement photo, but it's pretty close to it, because the guy in blue is a colonel, and he was a base commander. He's also, I know him because he's the dad of a really good friend of mine. But this time period would have been probably 90, 91. So pretty close to when he was retiring, but this is not his retirement photo.
Okay.
But yeah, so he's, again, in his flight suit, getting some kind of award. Like I said, I couldn't find that folder that would explain what this award was for, but he got a medal. But yeah, so.
Do you still have all his medals?
Yes. Yeah. My mom
Yeah.
has all that. She still
That's
has
neat.
his blues. Doesn't have his flight suit because that is what he chose to be buried in. Yeah, which this is okay, it's a little macabre, but he's cremated, and the place that did it told us it took a while because of the flight suit.
Flight suit.
Right. It's obviously it's fire retardant.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then also at his funeral, he didn't request any hymns or anything like that, but the Air Force song. Yeah. So it was, so whenever, hear that, get a little, melancholy, because that's, but yeah, so it meant that much to him, but you would have never known that his career meant that much to him, because it just wasn't something he talked about.
Right. So your dad would have been a colonel if he would have stayed in longer.
Yes, and it would have required us to move again, which, sucks when you're in high school.
Yeah.
I had friends who did, they moved their senior year, to a new place, but, lots of people did it. When I was, in grade school, I was in 3 different schools.
Wow.
I got to, spend most of it in Zuccoran in Okinawa, but yeah, some kids, aren't as lucky. Predominantly, you move every 3 years in the military.
Really?
So yeah, 3 or 4 years. And so even on my neighborhood in Okinawa, all of us, there are families moving in and out all the time.
Do you want to go back to Okinawa someday?
We've talked about it. Yeah, we've talked about it as a family, to go back, because the beach is there. I mean, I think that's what we did every weekend. We were at the beach.
Right.
My mom would put us in the car and a bunch of our friends, and would just, oh, there's a dirt road. It's it's going east or west. It's going to end up at a beach. We'll just take that road. Yeah, that's what we did.
Because it's a small island, isn't it?
It's very small. Yeah. And it was safe. I never.
Was it?
Yeah, I never had any, aside from a couple of, people trying to break in on the base, but it never felt, yeah, it was safe, and you could go out, like I said, to these beaches, and it would just be us, my mom, and a couple kids. Yeah.
That's
you
cool.
never, yeah, and again, one TV channel. So this is the 80s, MTV. I didn't even know it existed until I came back, and I was in 7th grade, and it was like, what is this? My sister and I think we sat and watched it for days.
Oh, when you moved to Michigan?
Yeah. When we came back to the States, we didn't know. Yeah. We just didn't. Growing up there, we didn't have that information at all. This is, no online, no internet, one TV channel, and you saw what was for adults for the most part.
Okay.
My grandma would video cartoons on Saturday and mail the VHS the VHS tapes to us, and that was like money over there, because we'd have all our friends over to watch the the cartoons, but we found the commercials absolutely fascinating because
Were they?
they didn't have those commercials on the military TV. Yeah, and so we didn't see a lot of the television programs until we came back, and it was it was culture shock, because very very isolated over there at that time.
Was the food good over in Okinawa?
It was. We ate a lot of the Japanese cuisine, which is a lot of the sushi. We ordered that like people order pizza here.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh. I
And then
love
you come here to
Japanese
the
food.
States, and yeah, it doesn't taste the same.
It's not the same.
No,
Not the
it's
same
not
at
the
all.
same. Yeah, and particularly it's not the same when you're in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which is
Right. Right. I bet lots of seafood, right?
yeah,
In
lots of
Okinawa.
seafood. Yeah, yep.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. That is fantastic. I bet this was fun for you.
It was. I just had a hard time kind of finding and putting stuff together, because
Yeah.
the photos, it was mostly of us kids, and yeah, I wasn't going to show I wasn't going to show a bunch of those photos.
Oh, we would love that.
Yeah, but even going to so it was just trying to find good information about and then with the tanker, the KC-135s, it's not a plane that is that gets a lot of recognition. But it's hugely vital to any operation. You need fuel for jets. So yeah, they were part of the tankers, are the part of every operation that involves planes, and
still are.
Yep, and still are. Yep.
Kelly, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
Yep, because this is it. This last photo.
Okay. There you go. Are you sure? Yep.